If you've ever sat at a family dinner and felt more invisible than the empty chair, then maybe you'll get this. Thanksgiving at the Dawson house was a production, not a meal. The kind of picture-perfect holiday where the silverware was polished, the napkins folded into swans, and every dish looked like it came straight off some Food Network show. But it wasn't about food. It was about status. And this year, as always, my sister Emily was the star. Major Emily Dawson. Age 42. Air Force Golden Girl. Freshly promoted. She walked in like a medal, with legs perfect. Posture perfect. Hair uniform, sharp enough to slice air. My parents beamed at her like she'd personally ended world hunger. As for me, I'm Claire Dawson, 3 years younger than my sister. To the Navy, I'm Commander Dawson, leader of a SEAL unit no one's allowed to know about. But here at this table, I'm still Claire the quiet one, the tech girl with no medals and no future in their eyes. We sat down at the long dining table, 12 chairs, candles flickering. The turkey was huge, the kind that could feed a football team. Cranberry sauce glistened like rubies. My mum floated around with serving trays humming. Dad raised his wine glass. To Emily, the youngest Dawson to make major. We couldn't be prouder. Everyone clinked their glasses. Except me. I lifted mine halfway, then set it down without sipping. Emily smiled like she knew how to win a crowd. Thanks, everyone. Honestly, I couldn't have done it without the example set by Dad. Big shoes to fill. Dad laughed. You're wearing them well, kiddo. I pushed a carrot around my plate, trying not to roll my eyes. Actually, I've been working on a new cyber defense system with a federal contract that's Emily. Cut in before I could finish. I just got off the phone with Tom, she said, her eyes lighting up. Tom was her boyfriend, an Air Force officer my parents adored, like he was about to marry the golden child. I'd never met him. He'd been stationed out west for months working on some top-level drone simulation project. Emily only ever called him Tom, so that's all I knew. To me, he was just another name dropped like a medal. He just wrapped up a drone simulation in Nevada last month. The results were even better than expected. She went on, her voice practically glowing with pride. He coordinated training with 4 squadrons, simulated GPS jamming in hostile terrain. Crazy stuff. As soon as she finished, my parents gasped on cue, like they'd witnessed it themselves. At the time, I barely registered the name. Just another Air Force guy with a cool assignment. I had no reason to connect any dots. Just like that, I disappeared again. The conversation took off. Air Force Tech Desert Deployments Commendations. My mum nodded like she understood a damn thing. My dad was in his element. Talking shop, reliving the glory days through someone who wasn't me. I tried to sneak in again. We're actually seeing spikes in ransomware that could... Mum cut me off, smiling sweetly. Claire, honey, do you think about going back to school? It's been a while since you really pushed yourself. I have a job, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Dad poured more wine. She sits on that computer all day, probably arguing with teenagers on Reddit. Emily snorted. No, come on, give her some credit. She posted a picture yesterday, coffee and laptop with the caption, grind mode. She's totally killing it. Everyone laughed. I forced a smile, staring at the mashed potatoes. My chest was tight. I'd been here before, same table, same script. I didn't belong in their world. Never had. They wore uniforms. They lived for rank and recognition. Me, I kept secrets. Not because I wanted to, but because I had to. After dinner, I slipped away. No one noticed. Upstairs in the guest room, I sat on the bed and opened my laptop. The glow felt like a spotlight in the dark. There it was, the email I'd read 100 times. Congratulations, Claire Dawson. You've been selected for Officer Candidate School. Report date, January 12th. I stared at it. Not because I didn't believe it, but because no one else would. They wouldn't believe that their invisible daughter, the one who wasted her potential, had been recruited by the Navy for something they didn't even know women were doing. I opened another file. Journal, Jordan. Jordan was the only one who ever really saw me. He was a Marine, killed 2 years ago in a mission no one talks about. He used to call me the Quiet Blade, said I was the one who changed things not with noise but with action. I typed Nov 23. Thanksgiving, same table, same jokes. Emily got another promotion. Dad gave a speech. Mom cried. No one asked what I've been doing. No one knows. That email from command still just between me and this screen. I miss you, Jordan. I hope you'd be proud. I paused, then added, they still see me as nothing. But soon, they'll realize I was never sitting at the kids' table. I just stopped talking and started doing. I saved the file, closed the laptop. Laying back on the bed, I let the silence wrap around me. Not emptiness, just space. Space between who they thought I was and who I was becoming. They could keep laughing at coffee, hashtags, and rolling their eyes at my screen time. To them, it looks like wasted time. But what they don't know is I've been called up. Official orders from the Navy. I already knew how I'd play it. When I came home, I'd bring my laptop, call it remote cybersecurity consulting for a DC think tank. They'd believe me. They always had. No questions, no fact-checking, just nods and wine refills. It wouldn't be deception, just camouflage. And in this family, that was all I needed. And somewhere out there, a guy named Tom, who once failed the same tests I passed, was about to remember the name Claire Dawson for a very different reason. I'm about to step into a world they don't even know exists. And in less than 6 weeks, I was gone. No fanfare, no airport send-off. I told them I was taking a sabbatical for a tech fellowship. No one asked which one. I packed light war jeans and left a coffee cup in the sink just to make it look casual. But inside, I was burning. The Navy intake process wasn't what people imagine, no dramatic salute or handshake. Just a fingerprint scanner, a clipboard, and a waiting room filled with tension. They didn't tell me much, only that I was being evaluated under naval intelligence, and that my background in cybersecurity and adaptive problem-solving made me eligible for a special track. I signed forms I wasn't allowed to read in full. I handed over my phone. Then, my name. My first base was tucked into a corner of Virginia, a place they called the Grey House, though no one ever confirmed that officially. The training began immediately, days of simulations, tactics, drills, intel puzzles that seemed more like games, until you realized failing them meant someone would die in the real world. Most of us never saw daylight before 1900 hours, and that's where I met Lieutenant Harris. He was one of those men with a square jaw and a square mind, the type who probably had his polo shirts folded by colour at home. During our first briefing, he looked me over like I'd wandered into the wrong building. "You're the tech girl, right?" he said during lunch, not even looking up from his protein bar. Didn't realise we were letting coders play soldier now. I didn't answer, just chewed my chicken slowly, then pulled up the battle map simulation on my tablet and made 3 strategic suggestions in front of the entire table. 2 hours later, we won the simulation exercise. Harris didn't say another word to me for a week. Commander Blake noticed, though. He was tall, quiet, and carried the kind of energy that made everyone around him sit straighter. A former SEAL, now running advanced ops selection. He never smiled, unless it was earned. "Dawson," he said one afternoon, pulling me aside after a tactics module. "You think different. That's rare and valuable. I want to submit your name for Phoenix." I blinked. "What's Phoenix?" He looked at me hard. "Something that's not officially real." 2 days later, during a live fire drill, the field caught. Literally. A malfunction in the exercise turned a basic extraction sim into chaos. One of the rookies panicked, dropped his gear, and got pinned behind a burning barricade. People were shouting. Frozen. I didn't think. I crawled under a collapsed beam, unlatched his harness, and dragged him back through the smoke. My hands were blistered, and I couldn't hear out of my left ear for 2 days. But when the incident report came out, it said, assistance provided by trainee Claire Dawson in coordination with unit response. Coordination. Like I hadn't hauled a guy the size of a fridge out of a fire by myself. Later that night, Harris passed me in the hall and muttered, "Don't get used to hero points. You're still in the novelty stage." I didn't respond. I wrote in Journal Jordan instead. Jan 8. First, fire. Not metaphorical. My knuckles are torn up, but I didn't freeze. I acted, and they still framed it like teamwork, like I was a side note in my own story. You'd be pissed, Jordan, or maybe you'd just say, keep moving. So I will. The next morning, Commander Blake handed me a sealed envelope. Report to Outpost 17, Arizona, Phoenix Directive. That was it. No speech, no warning. Just a transfer into something so classified it didn't officially exist. I didn't know if there were others like me, women outsiders, the invisible ones. But I knew this. I was done waiting for permission to be seen. And so, I arrived at Coronado under the grey pre-dawn light, one duffel bag, and a name that meant nothing to anyone here. No tech girl, no major sister, no expectations. Just Dawson Candidate 412 about to begin Bud S. Basic underwater demolition SEAL training. The place where even the strongest broke. Day 1, they shaved our heads. Or tried to. My hair was already buzzed down from Phoenix prep, but that didn't stop the instructor from muttering already ahead of the game while yanking the clippers through my scalp anyway. They made us strip down and plunge into freezing surf crawl, through wet sand roll, until we were covered head to toe in grit. Welcome to sugar cookies, the instructor barked. Get used to being uncomfortable. There were 53 of us. Only 2 women. The other one was Sarah. I noticed her on day 2, tall, lean, dark eyes like she'd seen more than she said. She didn't talk much, not even to the guys who tried joking with her. She moved like someone who didn't need approval, just progress. We never got close in the way people usually think. No shared backstories or whispered hopes. Just nods, glances. Silent acknowledgements that we were both holding something heavier than the sandbags we were forced to carry during runs. During week 3, my mum called. They gave us 5 minutes to check messages. I hadn't expected anything, but there it was, voicemail 2 minutes long. "Hi, honey, it's Mum. Just wanted to check in. Emily said she might be getting a transfer to DC. Can you believe that? A major in the Pentagon. We're so proud. Anyway, hope you're doing something fun. Maybe take some time to relax this weekend. Love you." That night, I swam 4 miles in the training bay after lights out. No supervision, no applause. Just me, the cold water, and the voice in my head saying, "Still not enough." I wrote to Jordan that night. Jan to 21. I'm here. They don't know who I am. And I think that's the only reason I'm still standing. Every part of me hurts. Blisters, bruises, joints on fire. But I haven't quit. Not even once. Not even when the boat crew captain made me carry the log alone because "you look light, Dawson." I didn't drop it. I didn't say a word. You always said I fought best in silence. I hope you're right. The days blurred. We ran with boats on our heads, did flutter kicks in ice water until we couldn't feel our legs, crawled through the grinder yard until skin came off our elbows. Hell Week loomed, but already 10 had dropped out. Sarah didn't flinch once. She got shin splints on day 5 and duct taped her legs to keep going. During night drills, she'd whisper breath counts to herself. I started matching her rhythm. It kept me from slipping. Then came the confidence pool test, drown proofing. Hands and feet tied, dropped into deep water, forced to float bob and retrieve objects from the bottom. A test designed to break your sense of control. Sarah panicked. First time I saw it. She slipped under eyes wide, air gone. I didn't think. I dove. Got her shoulder kicked upward, screamed her name even though no sound came through. We hit the surface. The instructors blew whistles. I dragged her out. They punished me. Break protocol again, one barked and you're out. That night, I didn't write. I just sat next to Sarah on the sand. She didn't thank me. She didn't have to. She just said, "Next time, let me drown." I stared ahead. Not happening. By the end of the 5th week, we were down to 27. My body felt like it belonged to someone else. I lost feeling in 2 toes. I was sleep-deprived, starving, sore beyond anything I thought possible. But I was still there. And so was Sarah. Before lights out, I opened the journal again. Jan, 30. Still here. They still don't know who I am. Maybe that's the only reason I'm surviving. I can be whatever they project onto me. But underneath, I'm burning like hell, Jordan. I haven't cried, haven't cracked, just silence. But it's getting heavy. And then came Hell Week. No sleep, no mercy, no escape. They called it training, but it was more like a slow-motion war on your mind. We were dropped into the abyss and told to keep swimming, physically, mentally, emotionally, until we either broke or became something else entirely. We started at 0100 on a Sunday. Sirens, bullhorns, boots, pounding the hallway. They kicked the doors open and screamed us out of our cots like we'd committed a crime. Sandbags were thrown at us. Orders barked, names forgotten. I was just 412 now. No more Claire. No more Dawson. We were shoved straight into the surf, fully clothed. The water was so cold it punched the air out of my lungs. Our boat crew had to carry the inflatable dinghy overhead while running back and forth across the beach. Each time someone faltered, we were ordered to drop and give 20 with the boat still over our heads. "Your pain means nothing," one instructor yelled. "You want rest, die." By hour 10, people were already shaking. One man vomited into the sand, wiped his mouth, kept running. Another limped so hard they pulled him off the course. He never came back. That was the thing with Hell Week, you didn't leave with a handshake. You just vanished. On the second day, we spent 6 hours in the mudflats. Imagine a football field of sludge, waist-deep, freezing cold, with instructors shouting at you to link arms and stay submerged. Our heads bobbed above the surface like lily pads. We weren't allowed to speak, just shiver and wait. One guy next to me started muttering to himself, then humming, then crying. I turned my head slightly. Sarah was 5 bodies over. Her eyes were closed, lips moving in what looked like prayer. She looked still, like she belonged there. That night, we weren't given blankets, just wet clothes and open windows. Sleep was a joke. I sat up against the wall, arms around my knees, teeth clacking like broken keys. Someone next to me whispered, "This isn't training. It's torture." He wasn't wrong. Day 3. We ran for 14 miles at sunrise. Soft sand, weighted packs, blood in our socks. I slipped on a rock during a beach drill, slammed my shoulder into a submerged reef. I heard something pop. "Dawson down," someone shouted. I shook my head. Good. Blood soaked through my uniform. I wrapped it with duct tape during chow and said nothing. Pain was irrelevant. That evening, they made us do boat carries again. My arms gave out halfway through the set. My knees buckled. I saw stars. One instructor got in my face. "Quitting time." "Dawson?" I didn't answer. I got up, lifted the damn boat again, grit in my mouth, blood in my sleeve, fire in my spine. That night, they rolled us in the sand and forced us into the ocean. It was called a sugar cookie wash. I was still bleeding. Salt water hit the wound like lightning. I almost screamed. Beside me, Sarah whispered, "Don't give them the sound." I nodded even though I wanted to cry. I clenched my fists and sank under again. Late that night, while carrying a log across the beach, one of the guys dropped out. Just collapsed in the wet sand face down. I crouched to help. He looked up at me dazed. "I thought you'd be the first to break," he mumbled, "but you keep going like you don't care if anyone notices." "I don't," I said, pulling him up. "Not anymore." He started crying, mud running down his face. I said nothing, just helped him to his feet. That was the moment it shifted. I realized I wasn't just surviving for some future recognition. I was surviving because disappearing would mean they'd been right. Back in our barracks, I sat against the boat, back aching legs numb. I opened Journal Jordan on my tablet with shaking fingers. Feb 4, night 4. My arms trashed. I can't feel my toes. They want to break us, Jordan. Break me. But I'm not going down. Not because I'm stronger, just because I'm sick of being erased. This isn't about medals anymore. It's about memory. Mine. Day 5. The final blow. Pool comp. They tied our hands and feet and dropped us into the deep end. We had to float retrieve our masks from the bottom surface, all while not panicking. Sarah was ahead of me. I watched her descend graceful steady until she wasn't. She panicked, kicked hard, rose too fast, slipped. She didn't surface. Without thinking, I dove. I wasn't supposed to. I knew the rules. But rules don't matter when someone's about to die. I grabbed her vest and kicked up. She coughed, gagged. They pulled her out, grabbed me by the collar. "You're lucky she's alive," an instructor hissed. "Next time we let you both sink." They punished me, made me carry extra logs, run until my knees locked. No food for 24 hours. I did it, every second without complaint. That night, Sarah found me by the lockers. "You shouldn't have done that." "I would again." She looked at me for a long time. "They'll never say it, but they saw you. I don't need them to." And that was enough to carry me into the next chapter Phoenix team. I was escorted onto the base early next morning before dawn by 2 Navy MPs. No fanfare, no brass band, just the hollow echo of my boots on concrete and the distant hum of jets. My duffel bag hit the ground at the entrance to the annex. A guard motioned me inside with a stiff nod. "Naval Intelligence Briefing Room, Phoenix team." "You're late." That was it. I wasn't a candidate anymore. I wasn't the phantom nobody. I was part of something nobody spoke about. Inside lights were low. A dozen operators, men and women, sat around a metal table, posture, perfect, silence heavy. Identification badges marked them as NI, not SEAL. Some faces I recognized Harris among them. His clean-shaven face looked tighter, sharper. He didn't need the uniform to be threatening. He was Lieutenant Harris now, no longer mocking, but sizing me up. He spoke first. "Damson protocol dictates we don't speak about Hell Week. You did well." He glanced at me, eyebrows raised. "We'll see if you earned the right to stay." Commander Blake from Phoenix Selection stood. He nodded at me. "Welcome. You're here because you did more than survive. Now we see if you can lead." That afternoon, Reyes, our operations officer, pulled me aside in a dimly lit corridor. "Congrats," he said. His tone was polite but wary. "Phoenix team is alpha-level covert. You misstep, and it's more than your ass on the line this entire unit folds. Don't get yourself or us killed for ego." I swallowed. "Yes, sir." He studied me a long moment, then nodded once and walked away. We moved into a secure compound, reinforced walls, tinted windows, no records that linked us to buds. Phoenix team existed on paper as an intelligence support unit, naval intel high-level analysts. But beneath that cover, we were operators recon extraction covert rescue. My old life, the laptop, the jokes, the hidden email was gone. No earphone wires, no encrypted journals. Just a new name, Commander Dawson. A week in, we trained together, marked distance runs, night navigation, mock hostage rescue. Harris was cold. He gave terse orders, tested me during drills. I showed up early, stayed late. I kept quiet. My silence was stronger than any smart answer. In the field, during a critique after a failed mock extraction, Reyes rounded on me. Naval Intel Commander Dawson, why didn't you check comms before moving in? My heart hammered. Patterns were everything. I made the call, sir. Contextual override, I replied. Reyes pierced those words. Explain. I did. I pointed out chatter that matched intel. I broke the chain. I accepted responsibility. He stared, then shrugged. Lucky call. You stay. That evening, I went through psychological screening, another element of Phoenix secrecy. I sat in a bare room, dim light. A civilian psychologist clipboard, in lap eyes gentle but probing. Do you hate your family? She asked. That question knocked the air out of me. In the silence, I fought tears. They were my strength. No, I said finally. I hate that they don't see me. I hate that they've already decided who I am. But I don't hate them. She scribbled something. You're carrying a lot of anger. That could be a weapon or a weakness here. I nodded. It's fuel. She waited. Then stood. Good. Over the next month, we operated under the intelligence tag, tracked targets, ran Overwatch, worked in pairs. The diversity was real. Women, men, analysts turned field operators. Gender didn't come up. Experience did. One late-night comms check. Harris nodded at me. You've proven yourself, he said, just loud enough for me to hear. Keep it up. I let my lips remain still. That was enough acknowledgement. By the end of the first mission, a simulated crisis in an abandoned factory, I led the breach team. We cleared rooms, pulled hostages, recovered intel. After Blake came up to me, nodded once. No speech, no clap, just respect in his eyes. Back in the barracks, Sarah, who'd been moved to my team, slapped me on the back. Damn, Commander, look at you. I smiled, because that's all I needed. Every step, every drill, every silent nod built something that words couldn't capture. For the first time, I was part of something that didn't erase me. That didn't mock me behind my back. That cut straight to results. At night, I still wrote in my mind to Jordan, Feb 28, Phoenix team. I'm part of something no one talks about. No titles at home matter. Out here, I matter. I'm not the shadow, I'm the compass. And then Aleppo happened. It was supposed to be a routine recon assist Phoenix team embedded with NATO intelligence to extract a compromised US Air Force unit from a failed comm station outside Aleppo, Syria. The mission was classified top level, in out no civilian contact, zero casualties. It never goes that way. The moment we landed, the dust stung like salt. We moved at dusk, the sky turning that burnt orange hue that made everything look unreal. Claire Reyes, Sarah Harris, and 2 operators formed the core unit. My job was Overwatch and Intel decipher. The chatter was chaotic, enemy combatants overlapping signals, a scramble of Arabic-English static. By the time we reached the compound, it was half-crumbled, shrapnel-scarred and surrounded. We could hear gunfire echoing through the alleyways. Inside, a group of airmen were pinned down in a makeshift comms room. There were at least 8. One voice came through clearer than the rest, calm under pressure, issuing orders to stabilize the injured lock points of entry, conserve ammo. A woman. American accent. Sharp, commanding, familiar. We launched smoke grenades, breached the east wall, and entered under fire. I moved in tandem with Harris. Reyes covered the rear. The smell of blood and oil hit hard. We split the team. Sarah and I pushed left, clearing room to room. We found 3 airmen huddled in a corridor, one with a leg wound. I handed off a compress and moved forward. In the comms room, the woman's voice cut through again. Stay behind the pillar, Roberts. They've got line of sight. When I turned the corner and saw her helmet on face covered in dust, uniform streaked with sweat, I froze for half a second. She didn't look at me, just barked into her headset, ordered 2 airmen to grab equipment and follow. I caught her profile, the sharp line of her jaw, the slightly hoarse voice from too many hours yelling in wind and sand. I knew that voice. Even distorted by stress and static, it was burned into me. Emily. I didn't blink. I didn't speak. "Cover left," she shouted, never realizing the person sliding into position was her sister. I laid down, suppressing fire, as Sarah dragged 2 wounded out. Reyes gave the extraction signal. We moved tight, clean. As we retreated through the east alley, a shell exploded near the exit. The blast threw me sideways. Everything rang white. When I blinked back, the only thing I saw clearly was a child, maybe 5, clutching the leg of an airman, wide-eyed and silent. Where the hell did she come from? No time. I scooped her up, one arm holding her against my chest. Her scarf, a red cotton wrap too bright for this ash-coloured place, brushed my cheek. She didn't scream, just held on. We boarded the chopper. Dust, smoke, shouting. I sat with the girl in my lap, my helmet off. She looked up at me with eyes too tired for her age. When we landed at the forward operating base, medics took the wounded. The girl was passed to a translator. I handed her the scarf back, but she pushed it into my palm, nodding once before she was led away. Emily walked past me without even seeing me. Later, Sarah approached as I sat outside the tent, washing the blood off my arms. "She looked familiar," she said. "Who?" "The intel officer, the one shouting orders." I kept my eyes on the water running red into the dirt. I didn't notice. Sarah watched me for a moment. "You just saved someone you knew, didn't you?" I didn't answer, just folded the red scarf and tucked it into my vest pocket. Back in the debrief room, Pierce call sign, Tom spoke quietly to the CO. He'd taken a blast to the shoulder, but still stood straight, jaw locked. Later, he approached me carefully, like someone approaching a sleeping lion. "I don't want to overstep," he said, "but I think I recognize you." I said nothing. "You're Claire, right?" I met his gaze, stone still. "You saved her," he added, "and the kid." "Thank you." "She doesn't know," I said. He nodded. "She will. Someday." In my tent that night, I opened my mental journal again. March 17th. Aleppo. We got them out. 8 lives, 1 child, 1 voice I can't forget. I didn't speak, didn't say I was her sister, didn't say I'd carried her voice in my head longer than I care to admit. I just did my job. Like she always said I couldn't. I wonder if she'd have looked at me differently if she knew. Or maybe it's better she didn't. I stared at the red scarf for a long time before turning off the light. A week later, an email landed in my inbox buried between encrypted mission logs and logistics memos. No subject line, just a forwarded message. "You're invited to the formal promotion ceremony of Major Emily Dawson." Attached was a PDF flyer with gold lettering and the official Air Force insignia. Black tie, 1900 hours, Officers Club, clean, proper, untouchable. I hovered over the delete key. Wasn't planning on going. Why would I? She didn't know I was there in Aleppo. She didn't know I existed beyond the context of family jokes and backhanded compliments. I had the scarf in my locker. She had no clue I'd saved her life. And maybe that was better. Then the phone rang. It was Mum. "I hope you'll come," she said, skipping the usual pleasantries. "It's important to your sister." "To Emily?" I asked flat. "To the family," she corrected. "You're still part of this family, Claire. Right still like I had been temporarily evicted." I stared at the wall for a long beat before saying, "Sure, Mum, I'll come." The night of the event, I wore a simple black pantsuit. Civilian. Neutral. No insignia, no ribbons, no reason to be noticed. That was the point. The Officers Club looked like something out of a movie. Warm, golden lighting champagne trays, gliding between epaulets and medals. Conversations as polished as the brass nameplates. Too perfect. Too sterile. I stayed near the back, just inside the doorway. eyes scanning out of instinct, entry points, bottlenecks, faces. I spotted my father first, laughing loudly with 2 retired Navy men, my mother by his side smiling in a way I hadn't seen in years, not at me. Never at me. Neither of them saw me. Captain Pierce was near the bar laughing with a cluster of officers. I recognised him instantly even before I heard someone refer to him by name. Pierce, the real name of Tom Emily's boyfriend. I had only known him through stories, never met him in person. Emily always called him Tom, her affectionate nickname for him. She'd said he was finishing a drone simulation exercise in Nevada. I had no reason to connect that name with the man I'd once seen listed in SEAL candidate archives. The man who didn't make it. The man who years ago whispered to a friend in training, "There's a woman out here who's going to rewrite history." When his eyes flicked over me, he froze. His brow knit a beat too long. Then he turned back toward his drink like he didn't want to believe whatever he'd just recognised. A chime rang out as someone tapped the mic. "Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Major Emily Dawson, soon to be officially promoted to Lieutenant Colonel." Applause rippled through the room, and then there she was, Emily, my sister, in full blue-silver gleaming ribbons immaculate. She stood like the flag was stitched into her spine. Every eye was on her just like it had always been. "Thank you," she said. "I'm honoured and humbled. I wouldn't be here without the strength of my team, the mentorship I've received, and most importantly, the love of my family. Dad, thank you for setting the bar so high. Mum, for believing in both your daughters. Even when one of us made it more difficult." Polite laughter followed. Even my father chuckled. I didn't move. Emily continued. "I've learned that real leadership isn't about volume, it's about vision. It's about noticing the people who don't demand attention, the ones who serve without the spotlight." For a second, her eyes swept the room. I held my breath. Did she see me? No, just a scan. A practiced politician's pause. She smiled again. "Thank you all." Applause burst out louder than before. Glasses clinked, cameras flashed. People began to line up, eager to shake her hand, touch a bit of that gold dust. I turned, started toward the exit. I almost made it. "Claire." The voice stopped me cold. "Pierce." He stepped closer, frowning. "It is you." I stared back. "You're mistaken." "No. Syria. You were there." His voice dropped. "You pulled her out. I remember your face." I said nothing. "She doesn't know, does she?" "No. You're not going to tell her I didn't come here for recognition. She'd want to know." I met his gaze. Would she, or would it ruin her narrative? He didn't answer right away. "I think it might change something." "Then let it stay, unchanged. She's your sister." I nodded once. "Exactly." I walked away before he could say more, my chest tight. Outside, the cold air hit like a reset. I leaned against the brick wall, pulling my coat tighter. The red scarf was in my inner pocket, its corner just visible. Inside, people celebrated her. Toasts, Flash's legacy being sealed. Out here, it was quiet. Still. And for the first time that night, I breathed. They could have their medals, their titles, their well-lit speeches. I was the one who had pulled her from fire, walked through hell, and said nothing. Because silence wasn't weakness. It was a choice. And tonight, it was my shield. But shields don't last forever. I had just rounded the corner of the parking lot when I heard the heavy thump of dress shoes hitting pavement. I turned. Captain Pierce. "Wait," he said, jogging the last few steps. His breath was quick, but his eyes were sharp. I didn't speak. He stood at attention. Commander Dawson, and then he saluted. My body froze. From the doorway behind him, voices died. Conversations dropped. The sound of glassware stopped clinking. Emily stood in the threshold, her smile faltering head, slightly tilted in confusion. My father was a few steps behind her. He looked startled, like someone had just told him gravity was optional. "I'm sorry," Pierce said quickly, seeing the look on my face. "I didn't mean to." "You just outed me," I snapped. My voice was low, controlled, but lethal. "I know, I'm sorry. When I saw you walking away, I couldn't undo it," I cut in. "That salute doesn't come off like a name tag." Emily walked closer slowly. "Claire, what the hell is going on?" My heart was hammering, but my mouth was calm. "Apparently, Pierce has trouble keeping his military decorum in check," Commander Emily repeated, frowning. You're not even in the military." "That's what you think," I said, eyes steady. "Because none of you ever bothered to ask." Dad stepped forward now, confusion turning to skepticism. "What's this about? Some kind of prank?" Pierce cleared his throat, hesitating, then said, "She's Naval Special Operations. Command level." Emily blinked slowly, connecting dots. "No, that can't be. You're not even cleared for. She is Pierce," said tone more certain now. "She's the one who led the Syria extraction. The reason we got out alive." Emily took a step back like she'd been hit. "You were there?" "You never looked at my face," I said. "But yeah, I pulled you out." Silence. Pierce glanced between us, uncertain. Emily sat down heavily on a nearby bench, staring at nothing. "All this time I thought Tom," I interrupted gently. "Tom's your name for him. I only knew him as Pierce. He told me about the woman he admired who did what he couldn't. I didn't know he meant my sister." Emily looked up, shaken. "You knew each other," in passing, Pierce said, "before the Air Force. I tried SEAL training. Didn't make it. Claire did. First woman I ever saw. Outpaced half a class of men. I never forgot it." My mother had appeared behind Dad now, hand on his shoulder. "Claire," she said softly, "why didn't you tell us?" I shook my head. "Because it was classified. Because it was safer. Because even if I did, you still would have laughed about Reddit and coffee photos." Emily's voice was hoarse. "You let me stand on stage and talk about leadership, and you were out here hiding this." "No," I said. "I wasn't hiding. I was surviving. I was doing the job no one asked about, because it didn't fit the family photo." A small group had formed nearby. Strangers, watching, listening. "This wasn't supposed to happen," I muttered, glaring at Pierce. "I'm sorry," he said again. "It wasn't a choice, it was instinct. I'd salute you again." I stepped closer. "Then don't ever do it in public again." He nodded. Emily looked at me. "All these years, I thought you were wasting your life." "Yeah," I said, "so did I. Until I realised the only thing I was wasting was time waiting for you all to see me." I turned to leave. Behind me I heard my dad whisper, "Jesus Christ." I had no idea. I didn't look back. That night, I wrote one line in my journal to Jordan. He saluted me, Jordan, and they all looked at me like I was a stranger. Maybe that's what I am now. But I stood still. I didn't flinch. Next morning, the house was too quiet. I dumped the red scarf in my backpack and tucked away my suit, trying to erase traces of last night. My phone buzzed. "Come downstairs." From Dad's contact. He didn't usually text me. I found the kitchen empty except for Mum clutching a mug, staring at its chipped rim like it held answers. I texted here and heard footsteps. Dad stood in the doorway, sharp as ever in his service blues. Even unpressed, they were intimidating. His posture was still military, but his eyes, they were wounded, like he'd burned himself on something he couldn't fully name. "Claire," he said quietly, his voice the lowest I'd heard it since I was a kid, and forgot a report on time. He turned away for a moment. I felt his pain before he spoke again. "You never gave me a chance to see you." He slammed a fist on the counter, not loud but intentional. The kind of silence after that pulse cuts deeper. You built this life in secrecy, in shadows, and I didn't know. Mom started crying softly behind us, the kind of tears that ache deep and long. Emily stumbled in footsteps, hesitant. She paused in the doorway. Dad. He looked at her. Are you really safe now? Are you okay? Her eyes flicked to me, then to Dad, then narrowed on the spot next to the counter. 3 ghosts hung there. Claire, the tech girl, Tom's girlfriend, and last night's commander. She took a breath. And Pierce. He knew a cold pulse. Everyone froze. He's her boyfriend, and he recognized me and didn't warn her. Emily's voice cracked. He didn't tell me my sister was him. They both looked at Pierce, who wasn't here. But his shadow lingered. Dad interrupted, voice trembling with years of unspoken pride and hurt. As a father, I thought my daughter was underachieving. Now I find out she's risking her life undercover, and even he, of all people, knew your sister better than you. The room closed in. Mum pressed her hand to her mouth, eyes full. Emily's anger flared, words sharper than tears. You kept secrets from us too. You let me stand up there, thinking I was the one people noticed, while my own sister walked among them in silence. I matched her tone, pain sharpening in my voice. I didn't tell you, because every time I tried, you dismissed me. And Dad, I paused, searching for the right words. It was easier to talk to a uniform. I didn't have one. Dad's jaw tightened. He looked so conflicted, as if guilt and pride wrestled inside him. Mum's voice cracked, each word splintering. All those years. Claire, where were you? How many times did you wake up on mission while we sat here clueless? I had no idea you were in danger. Her tears fell heavier. I felt something shift inside me, a weight lifting and collapsing at once. I swallowed. No one asked. No one thought I could be that person. So I stopped trying to explain. My voice was low, precise. Emily took a step toward me, fists clenched. So you stayed silent just to hurt me? No. I shook my head. If I wanted to hurt you, I would have told you earlier. I stayed silent because I thought I'd be saving you, saving all of you by staying invisible. I looked at Dad, and it saved my life. Maybe even saved my chance to come back alive. Mum grabbed my hands. Claire, you should have trusted us. I closed my eyes. It wasn't trust that was missing, it was belief. You believed in medals, ranks, photos, not the unseen. Dad sighed heavy. Maybe I was blinded. The Dawson legacy. I never looked for a new path. Emily's voice softened, quieter than before. You saved me, Claire. You saved my unit. And Pierce knew. You two knew, and I didn't even get a clue. It wasn't concealment, I said gently. It was protocol, Phoenix rules. But mostly, I didn't think you would hear it. Not as me. Emily looked down, tears welling. I don't even know what to feel. Silence came soft and real. Finally, Dad stepped forward, meeting my eyes. Claire, when I retire, I'll have patches and ribbons. But if you are real, then it's time I looked at them. It's time I looked at you. Silence filled the room, but gentler. Mum whispered, You're always our daughter. Emily voice shaking slowly. I stood on a stage giving speeches about unseen leadership, and my sister was out there being it, and Pierce, knew you, and I didn't know. A long pause. I thought Tom was perfect, but maybe he wasn't honest either. Sarah's words from Hell Week echoed. They saw you. I realised they were finally starting to. I stepped back, looking at them all soft. I don't need awards, I said. I just need to be known. Dad nodded once stiffly. Let's figure that out. I slammed the front door behind me and leaned against it, my suitcase sitting in the hallway. It slipped from my fingers and thudded against the wood. The thunk echoed in the silent house, too quiet, too still. Upstairs, I could hear Mum's muffled sobs and Dad's low voice trying to comfort her. Emily, I had no idea. They were finding each other in shards. I was elsewhere. I trudged into the study, the one room that was still mine. The walls were lined with diplomas, photos of a childhood I barely felt part of anymore. I dropped onto the leather chair and pulled out my laptop. There in the folder, labelled Letters to Jordan, lay every message I'd never sent. Each one was time-stamped a breadcrumb trail through the years. Sometimes anger, often doubt, always honesty. I clicked the earliest Jan 15, first day of OCS. I'm lying to them like it's Oxygen Jordan. But every stroke in the pool, every log carry, tells me I'm not what they think I am. I scrolled through dozens more Hell Week confessions, Phoenix assignments, Aleppo extraction. Each line was raw and unfiltered. I realised I'd spoken more truth in those letters than I'd ever spoken to my family or to myself. I paused on one from after the ceremony last night, the one that had haunted me. They know now, but they don't really see. I stared at those words. What did they mean? Because seeing isn't understanding. They had heard me. But did Dad's nod mean comprehension or obligation? Did Emily's strained apology mean acceptance or guilt? I needed clarity. I needed to sort the dust. I closed the laptop and padded to Mom and Dad's bedroom. The door was slightly ajar. Inside, Dad sat at the edge of the bed. Mom put her head on his shoulder. Emily lay next to them, face buried in pillow. I considered walking in demanding closure, but the scene stopped me. They were trying. It wasn't perfect. It was messy, real. Instead, I left and headed to the guest room. I shut the door and sank onto the bed. The red scarf lay on the nightstand, silent witness. From my desk drawer, I pulled out the folded note Emily had slipped under the door earlier that day. With trembling fingers, I unfolded it. The handwriting was tight and shaky, unlike her usual neat print. Claire, I never thought you'd be this strong. That's on me. I'm sorry I didn't see you. Love, Emily. My heart twisted. So many voices in my head, the older one mocking me, the younger one self-doubting, the one in Phoenix, silence the one in Aleppo. And now, this note. I closed my eyes and pressed the note to my chest. Would it ever be enough? I shuffled back to the study, sat at the desk and opened a new file. In Letters to Jordan, final letter.txt. My fingers hovered uncertain. After all that time, after all the missions, after the confrontation, after the note, I hesitated. This wasn't protocol. This wasn't classified intel. This was vulnerability. And maybe someone would read it. But I typed anyway, March 29th. They know now. And I don't know if that makes it better or worse. My sister wrote me a note. My mother cried. My father... He nodded like he was greasing old gears. But do they see me? They've heard the words, the rank, the mission, the risks. But seeing means closing a gap. And I'm not sure it's closed yet. So here's what I'm writing. Jordan, I survived Hell Week because I had nothing left to lose. I survived missions because someone needed me to. I walked into that house tonight because someone needed to see me. But being seen, that's a quiet fight without enemies on the field. I keep this file now for me before them, so that if their view crumbles again, I can still stand in truth. We tell the world what they want. I'm building a place where I tell myself what's real. Let them know who I am, but I'll know already. End. I saved the file and shut down the laptop. I felt lighter, not healed, not forgiven, but honest. In the night, I heard a soft knock on the door. Emily's voice, quiet Claire. Can I come in? I answered without hesitation. Come in. She entered wrapped in one of Dad's old sweaters. She closed the door gently behind her. We sat on the bed, shoulder to shoulder silence, holding space between us. I meant it, she whispered. I never thought, not like this. I reached out, took her hand. I don't need you to get it yet. Just don't turn away. Her hand squeezed mine back. I won't. We sat together in that quiet, no words, just presence. And for once, that felt enough. Before dawn, the house was silent, the kind of stillness only early morning brings the world holding its breath. My phone buzzed once, no frills, upward 4579. Immediate deployment, report 0430. I stared at the message heart already adjusting to mission mode. The warmth from last night, the brief closeness hung in the air like a fading echo. Downstairs, I moved like a ghost. Boots laced tight, pack on the floor, rifle case locked. My uniform lay folded, pressed, ready. As I zipped my bag, I paused in the hallway, looking toward my childhood room. A poster of the stars still clung to the wall, curling at the corners. Underneath it, an old plaque, Dream Big. I used to stare at that for hours, not knowing what big even meant. Now I did. When I stepped outside, the cold bit through my jacket. The driveway was bathed in pale light, and there, standing tall despite the chill, was my father. His old navy uniform hung on him like memory. He stood at attention, hands at his sides, eyes sharp but glassy. I stopped a few feet away. "You're up early," I said. He didn't move. "Commander Dawson," he said instead, voice gravel and pride. Then, slowly, deliberately, he saluted. It hit like a blow. I stood straighter, returned the salute. Formal. Measured. But inside, something shifted. The title that once felt like armor now felt like belonging. He lowered his hand. I should have seen it sooner. "That's on me." My throat tightened. I wasn't ready to be seen before. He nodded once. "That's fair." From the front door, Mum appeared. She wore a thick cardigan over her robe, her hair still in sleep tangles. In her hands was a small wooden frame. She came close and held it out. Inside were 2 photos. On the left, Emily in her dress blues polished poised. On the right, me in a grainy candid shot, during buds soaked, sandy eyes defiant. I added, "Yours," she said softly. "You should have been here all along." "Thanks, Mum," I said, voice breaking just a bit. Emily stood behind her. No robe, just sweats and a plain shirt. Her eyes were puffy but dry. She stepped forward, hands in her pockets. "You're leaving again," she said. "Duty calls." She looked down. "I never imagined that you were the one who pulled me out of that compound. I remember someone's hand strung fast. I thought it was a man." "It wasn't." "No," she said quietly. "It wasn't." There was a long pause. "I resented you for so long, for not being like me. But maybe you're the stronger one." "I'm not stronger," I said. "Just quieter." She gave a half laugh. "Yeah, well, keep doing what you do, quietly saving the world." "I'm not trying to save the world, Emily. Just do my part." She stepped forward, offered a hand. I shook it. Not warmth, but respect. It was a start. I turned to leave, shouldered my bag. As I reached the truck, Dad called after me. "Claire," I turned. "Make sure they know who they've got," he said. I nodded. They already do. In the truck, Sarah was waiting. Rough morning. "Better than most," I said. We pulled away from the curb. In the side mirror, I saw the mum holding the photo frame tight, Dad, with one hand lifted in farewell, and Emily standing alone watching. As the road stretched ahead, I pulled out my phone and opened Journal Jordan. The screen glowed familiar. Deck 18. Leaving again. But not like before. Not invisible, not uncertain. They saw me, Jordan. They really saw me. Maybe not everything, but enough. Dad saluted. Mum called me brave. Emily respected me. That's not the same as love. But it's something. It's a start. And now I carry that with me, into whatever comes next. I paused, typed again. You said I was the compass. I hope I still am. Because right now I feel like I'm finally pointed in the right direction. I hit save, closed the app. As we sped toward base, the sky exploded in streaks of orange and blue. A new mission waited. The girl they forgot had become the woman they saluted. I wasn't leaving to prove anything anymore. I was answering a call that finally felt like mine. The aircraft's engines thrum beneath me as I settle into my seat. Taciturn operators around the claustrophobia of the cargo bay, offset by its purpose. Each vibration travels through the floor into my bones, reminding me of every step that brought me here, the quiet, wild one, the invisible one. Now, seen not by accident, but by choice. I unzip the pouch on my vest and pull out my battered notebook, finger tracing the spine worn soft at the corners. I flip through the pages, a map of my life in ink, barley, legible mission tags, midnight fears, bullet-pointed promises. I stop at a cluster of entries surrounded by parentheses. They don't define me. I define me. On the next page is my own handwritten version of Jordan's words, "You've been burned in silence, but you never broke." The ink faded, but the message holds steady. A rookie voice cracks the hum overhead. "Sarge Commander Dawson," she says, voice somewhere between reverence and anxiety. "Are you ever afraid up here?" I look up surprised, not because of the question, but that someone noticed me noticing. In a moment, when dozens of faces blur into mission readiness, she saw me. I pause, closing the notebook with slow intention. "Yes," I say, head bowed toward the floor in thought. "I've been scared." My voice lands softly in the raw metal space. When I first joined, standing on a parade deck trying to explain myself to people who didn't believe me. When I carried injured teammates through water and cold, and I thought, what if they drown and I'm the one left alone? She swallows hard corner of mouth twitching. But I continue lifting my head. Being scared wasn't the worst part. The worst was the silence. That feeling that if I spoke, if I acted, people would look and not see. She shifts in her seat, straightening. I place my notebook on my lap. Fear is fuel. Silence is a wall. I open it again and write in bold across the blank margin, "I've been burned. But I never broke. I'm fireproof." I look at her, remember that. She smiles, a small spark in a harsh world. The aircraft begins to bank doors, locking with reassuring clunks. I tighten my helmet strap, check my comm board. The mission ahead is classified, but the mission inside me is proof. I lean back and listen to the jets hum the cadence of readiness around me. The team, all quiet professionals, but I sense warmth now, where there was always distance. We're in this together, scars and all. I close my eyes for a beat, thinking of the past 24 hours. Dad's salute, so deliberate, so full of acceptance. Mum's frame by the door, two halves of my lineage, finally acknowledging me. Emily's salute, a sign not of civility, but respect earned in silence. For years, I chased visibility like a bird beating against a pane of glass. Now, I don't crave it. I embody it. Rookie shifts closer. "Thanks," she says again low. "You'll do fine," I say. "Just don't let fear quiet you." She nods, tone stronger. The plane hits a pocket of turbulence. The lights flicker briefly. Jets roar louder. I breathe, steady. Earth's pull is real, but my mission is higher. Hours pass in a blur. We cross airspace, hit waypoints. Brief updates on comms blink across visors. ETA 5 minutes, ready for descent. Beacon confirmed. Team checks gear. I trace a memory line, a teenage girl on a high school track, drowning in her own doubt, copying a friend's homework because it felt safer. That girl is gone. I slide out my pen, write one final note beside the earlier message. I stand now. Whole. No punctuation after. A declaration left open. I close the book. Eyes forward, I find purpose in readiness. We brace, the ramp rumbles. A breeze, salty and serious, hits my face. I look out at the sunrise over a stranger country. Light tresses the field below in gold. I think of the road I took to get here, the silences, the hidden scars, the moments I wore invisibility like camouflage. They no longer define me. I define them. I tighten my vest plug into comms. Team ready, I send across the mesh. Silence waits. Then, acknowledged commander. And we move forward. Fireproof isn't the end, it's the meaning. Not because I needed anyone to say so, but because I chose to burn through the walls and build a life recognized, not for medals, but for truth. Maybe you felt like Claire before sitting at a table full of people who see right through you. Maybe you've kept your strength. Quiet carried battles no one clapped for and stayed standing when no one noticed. If that's you, I hope you know you are not invisible. You are fireproof too. If this story made you feel seen even for a moment, stick around. There are more stories like Claire's and maybe a bit like yours. Hit subscribe not for me, but for every quiet fighter still out there waiting to be heard.